of Africa today. Well, the World Bank have issued its latest report on Africa, the Africa Pulse, predicting an economic rebound due to increased the private consumption and declining inflation. The report, however, expected that the recovery will remain fragile due to uncertain global economic conditions, growing debt service obligations, frequent natural disasters and escalating conflict and violence. Overall, the report underscores that despite the projected boost in growth, the pace of economic expansion in the region remains below growth rate of the previous decade and is insufficient to have a significant effect on poverty reduction. Well, to shed more light on this, we had the pleasure to have with us over the phone our dear guest, His Excellency Ambassador Gamal Bayoumi, former Assistant Foreign Minister. Good afternoon, Your Excellency.
How are you?
Hello?
Yes, how are you?
How are you, sir? Good afternoon to you. Well, the World Bank's Africa Pulse report projected an economic rebound due to the increase of private consumption and also declining inflation. So what are the factors, in your opinion, contribute to declining inflation in Africa?
I am not astonished at all, by the way, because always Africa is in a very poor position. The money flow from Africa to the developed countries is much more than Africa receives as for its exports or as investment. Africa is paying its debts, it's paying also the invoice of its imports, which is tremendously much more than it gets that in the type of investment or in the type of exports to Africa. This has to be changed because you cannot continue milking Africa like that. And one day they will be in a position they cannot pay neither their debts nor the invoice of their imports. But nobody understands this very simple question, except some few countries like China now is knocking the door shyly in Africa, trying to invest there. We hope that this will encourage other countries to come and to invest in Africa. And as you may remember with me, that during the European African conferences, our president asked Europe to come to invest in Africa on the African soil with the money from Europe, with the experience of Egypt, which is very experienced and much more cheaper. And we hope that we can, like that, make the situation a little bit better. But in the short run, I'm not optimistic. Africa is suffering from being drained from its wealth for the sake of Europe, for the sake of the United States.
How do you expect uncertain global economic conditions and also the natural disasters and the escalating conflict and violence impact on the African economic outlook?
Unfortunately, I am generally optimistic, but I cannot be optimistic here because the whole world is suffering from one problem or another. We have the Ukrainian war. We have before that the epidemic of COVID-19. We have the civil wars in many countries around us. This is not encouraging at all. But maybe in the longer run, in the medium term, we shall see a better situation. But we have to do our homework also to encourage investors to come to invest in our countries.
Yes, Your Excellency, Ambassador Bayoumi, the report underscores that despite the projected boost in the growth, the pace of the economic expansion in the region still remains below the growth rate of the previous decade. So why do you think this is the case?
Because of the civil wars in many African countries because of the whole international situation that all the main economies are suffering. Even the Americans, they are suffering that they are indebted by more than 2.5 times their GDP. So nobody is in a good condition. But when you say that we are better, we are relatively better than others. And we hope that we can help our African brothers in order to can sell their merchandise in a better market, that they can attract more and more investment. But this will take some time in order to have it practically.
Yes. Why also is the projected boost in growth insufficient to have a significant effect on the poverty reduction, as the report says?
Yes, we have in our countries, we are suffering from bureaucracy. We are suffering from bad government. We are suffering for the most needy people cannot take their chance in their economy. We are suffering ourselves from bureaucracy, from relatively underdeveloped banking system. We don't have enough ports or enough ways of transport in order to make our merchandise go quickly to its markets. We have to also spend some main time in order to ameliorate the situation in our country, in Africa, in order to make it in a better situation.
Yes. Also, how can the African governments deal with the external liquidity of the problems and challenges, and also face the unsustainable debt burdens?
Here we are asking the international monetary system in order to help the countries who cannot pay back quickly their debt. And Egypt has a very good experience during the 90s when we asked the International Monetary Fund to call on the Paris Club, and we got 50% reduction on our debts. We got a longer period for paying back our debts, and we got much better conditions in order to pay back our debts. But it seems that we have to give all the signs that we have good intention in order to help ourselves. Mind you that always they are telling us God will help those who are helping themselves. So before we ask for the help of others, we have to help ourselves by making our position and our condition much better than before.
Yes. So how is the climate change also a crisis is impacting the African economy?
Very bad. As you will know, we are all suffering and staying at home, and this made our production less and less. But let us hope that this is a certain period which will cross as soon as possible, and we come back to the normal level of production. This is not normal, of course, what we are facing nowadays with the weather conditions.
Well, also the World Bank report have called for several policy actions in order to foster a stronger and more equitable growth, including macroeconomic stability. How can this be applied?
Yes, we have to look to the both sides, to the macroeconomic stability and to the micro also. And we always look to the big shape of the economy. But there are small details which, when we fix it quite well, it helps the economy. Here in Egypt now, we are helping the small and the very tiny projects in order to participate in the development of the country. So it's not the macro only. We have to look to the very detailed microeconomy. And here I am asking to our banking system and our financial organization to help those who are seeking to establish their very small projects not only the mammoth process of the big. This is the way in order to make the private and the public sector and the foreign investors and the big shark of the market also to participate in order to cross this pond.
Yes, I thank you very much for your time. Thank you for your valuable information. I really had the honor to have this phone with you. Thank you very much, Your Excellency, Ambassador Gamal Bayoumi, former Assistant Foreign Minister. Well, ladies and gentlemen, Somalia's ambassador to the United Nations on Monday have accused Ethiopian troops of making illegal incursions across their shared border, leading to the confrontations with local security services. The service, several local elders said contingent of the Ethiopian soldiers have crossed into Somalia's Hiran region to monitor threats from Al-Shabaab on Saturday and withdrew on Sunday. Details in the following report.
At least 3,000 Ethiopian soldiers are stationed in Somalia as part of an African Union peacekeeping mission, ATMIS, fighting Al-Shabaab, which controls large portions of Somalia. Another 5,000 to 7,000 Ethiopian soldiers are stationed in several regions under a bilateral agreement. Several local elders said a contingent of Ethiopian soldiers crossed into Somalia's Hiran region to monitor threats from Al-Shabaab on Saturday and withdrew on Sunday. Ethiopia's army and Ministry of Foreign Affairs spokespeople did not immediately respond to a request for comment. Somalia's UN ambassador Abu Bakr Dahir Osman said the recent misadventure by Ethiopia had forced his country to postpone the next withdrawal of ATMIS troops from July to September. ATMIS is committed to withdrawing by December 31, when a new smaller force is expected to replace it. As the drawdown proceeds with 5,000 of around 18,500 troops leaving last year, the government has projected confidence it can hold the line against Al-Shabaab. It has said the new force should not exceed 10,000 and should be limited to tasks like securing major population centers. Relations between Mogadishu and Addis Ababa nosedived earlier this year after landlocked Ethiopia agreed to lease 20 kilometers of coastline from Somaliland, a part of Somalia which claims independence and has had effective autonomy since 1991, but has failed to win international recognition. Ethiopia offered Somaliland possible recognition in exchange for being allowed to set up a naval base and commercial part there, a move Mogadishu has called illegal.
Kenyan police fired tear gas and rubber bullets in order to disperse young protesters in the capital Nairobi on Tuesday. This came as demonstrators rallied across the country against proposed tax hikes. More in the following report.
In Kenya, the mainly Gen Z-led rallies, which began last week, have taken President William Ruto's government by surprise, with the Kenyan leader saying over the weekend that he was ready to speak to the protesters. There was a heavy police presence early Tuesday in Nairobi's business district, with officers in full riot gear blocking access to Parliament, where lawmakers are debating the controversial financial bill containing the tax proposals. According to reporters, many shops in the area, the epicenter of previous demonstrations, were also closed, with officers firing tear gas at protesters. Elsewhere in the country, crowds were marching in the port city of Mombasa in the opposition bastion of Kisumu and Ruto's stronghold of Eldoret. The protests have been mostly peaceful, as Ruto noted Sunday in his first public comments on the demonstrations. But the Independent Policing Oversight Authority watchdog and rights groups said the two people had died following Thursday's rallies in Nairobi. Discontent over the cost of living crisis spiraled into nationwide rallies last week, with demonstrators calling for the finance bill to be scrapped. Parliament must vote on the legislation by June 30th. Several organizations, including Amnesty International Kenya, said at least 200 people were wounded in last week's protests in Nairobi. The cash-strapped government agreed last week to roll back several tax increases. But it still intends to raise some taxes, saying they are necessary for filling the state coffers and cutting reliance on external borrowing. Kenya has a huge debt mountain whose servicing costs have ballooned because of a fall in the value of the local currency over the last 2 years, making interest payments on foreign currency loans more expensive. The tax hikes will pile further pressure on Kenyans, with well-paid jobs remaining out of reach for many young people.
Well, South Africa's week and African National Congress denounced outrageous demands for cabinet positions by its coalition partners. This came in documents that are leaked to the press amid negotiations to form a government. More in the following report.
South Africa's week and African National Congress ANC denounced on Monday outrageous demands for cabinet positions by its coalition partners in documents leaked to the press amid negotiations to form a government. President Cyril Ramaphosa, 71, who has been re-elected for a second full term, will lead what his ANC calls a government of national unity after losing its outright majority in the May 29 general election. The historied ANC of the late Nelson Mandela has governed South Africa since the advent of democracy in 1994, but only scored 40% of the vote last month. The party said in a statement that the ANC notes with concern that some parties have been making outlandish and outrageous demands for specific cabinet positions in the media. In recent days, local media have reported tensions in negotiations between the ANC and the largest opposition party, the Democratic Alliance, DA, which won 87 parliamentary seats compared to the ANC's 159. Ramaphosa faces having to balance demands for key ministerial posts from his party and its new allies, as well as mediating diverging views to agree a common policy agenda on the economy and other pressing matters. But almost a month after the vote, no official communication has been made on the number of portfolios that will go to the new parties in government. The head of state is expected to announce an inclusive cabinet in the coming days. The National Unity Government has 10 parties in total, including DA, the Zulu Nationalist Inkatha Freedom Party, and other smaller groups.
Well, with this, my dear viewers, we come to the end of this episode of our program, Africa Today. My name is Aman Mukhtar. Thank you for watching.